Welcome to Shared Insights, everybody, the podcast from BA Insight. My name is Pete Wright, and I am here with prognosticator Jeff Fried. This is my favorite episode of the year, Jeff.
I'm glad you love it so much. I will tell you that besides prognostication being a mouthful, I'm always a bit nervous about making predictions because I'm not magic. I can't truly see the future.
I'd appreciate it if you'd not disabuse me of my opinion of you.
I don't mean to shock you with that.
You're shattering my worldview. We should talk about this, though. I am curious how this started. I don't believe we talked about this in the show, the predictions episode for 2017. Why did you start doing these predictions?
Well, it's a bit of a tradition in general in the industry. I recall I was in a former life the CTO of a place called Empirics, which was about a 400-person testing monitoring firm, and predictions for the year were a big deal. And it's sort of a fun tradition, like it's more fun, frankly, than making New Year's resolutions.
Oh, yeah.
I looked up sort of the general history of this, and New Year's predictions go way back. We think about Nostradamus in the 16th century, and how there's still a Nostradamus blog apparently predicting a third world war for this year.
So that's a nice way to kick us off.
They have a lot of volcanoes, earthquakes, disaster, but Nostradamus predicts that survivors of the year can live to be 200 years old.
Oh, wow. Man, that guy gets specific.
I will be hopefully much more pragmatic and useful than Nostradamus, although that bar is pretty low.
All right, so let's talk about your track record. How have you done since you started?
This is now with BA Insight my fourth year, and I will say that I worked last year to make the predictions much crisper. I got a little bit, I realized that it was too easy to do a Nostradamus and be fuzzy about what the interpretation of things were. And just for my own purposes, I made, I put numbers to stuff, et cetera, et cetera. Of the 10 predictions that I made a year ago, 7 have clearly happened.
Indisputably.
At 70%, according to the criteria that I laid out pretty crisply. Now, the other 3 were all things that I can demonstrate are in fact happening, but I set the bar too high and too fast. For example, I predicted that Azure would gain 10 points of market share on Amazon. And that's a lot. That's showing Microsoft winning the cloud very rapidly. And mid-year, meaning July, is the only published data for 2017 so far. At that point, Azure had gained 3 points and AWS 1 point in market share. So folks like IBM were losing, but Azure had gained, therefore, 2 of the 10 points. So I don't have the data, but I definitely can't claim that it reached 10 points. Same with Dynamics gaining ground on Salesforce, where I predicted a 5-point market share. And here there's no real published data yet, but Dynamics is growing like crazy, about 70% per quarter. But just my own sense of things, I'm not going to claim success on that. Probably I would say Dynamics gained 2 points, 3 points, not 5. The last one of the misses I find most interesting because if you recall, or if you're not aware, there's been a huge explosion in intranet in a box products. The intranets on Office 365, because they've become much easier to do and much more of the pieces are available in a cloud offering, have really been taking off. But at the same time, in the same this probably started about 18 months ago, system integrators that had been building custom intranets shifted to making products. And a year ago, there were 30 products on the market. And Microsoft had done a huge initiative publicly saying, we're aiming at this area. So I predicted that half of it was actually 26 at the time, 13 players would pull out. Now, it's sort of gone the opposite direction. There's a new intranet report from ClearStory, one of my favorite analysts, that says that now lists 42 providers, and there's only one that I can point to show that they pulled out of the market. But really the challenge is it's hard to tell that somebody has thrown in the towel. If you decide that you're not getting traction on your product because people are choosing others or going with out of the box, you still list it on your website, you still show it. So I'd say that prediction, which was my number 2 prediction last year, is going in the opposite direction. But I'm going to stick by all 3 of those in the coming year because I definitely believe that the trend is going that way. It's just a matter of time.
Well, you need to add to that particular prediction the last time when the product fell out of the upgrade cycle. Like, when was the last time it showed an update on the page? That would fit, right? Because it's going to be there forever. But if it hadn't been updated in 5 years, who cares?
The sort of interesting twist on that is there's not a single one of these offerings that came from a native product company. They all are services companies that to varying degrees have created product entities, and many of them don't have the muscles that a product company has about updates, maintenance, etc. So even ones that I know are alive aren't doing updates. They're like, well, each new customer will make it better and maybe we'll have a next version at some point. So that's a great suggestion as a measurement, but I'll figure out how to make it crisper this year.
All right. So where would you like to start talking about going into this year? Should we begin with machine learning, and are you comfortable making predictions around machine learning?
Certainly. I'll say 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I predicted that machine learning would be everywhere at a point where I think, now in retrospect, that seems totally obvious. But at the time, it was not at all clear. I'm going to go further now, having you sort of said lots of other people are predicting machine learning, to say that machine learning will become ubiquitous in search in particular. Right now, there's a ton of hype around this, and there's learning to rank packages in open source that, for the most part, don't really work. The promise of machine learning for learning about content, learning to rank, as well as learning user behavior and therefore making search and discovery better is becoming real. And when I say ubiquitous, I'll mean you won't field a new search or discovery application without an element of machine learning by the end of the year.
That's fascinating. I've been thinking about that since, as you say, 2-3 years ago, we started talking about machine learning in this light, and it almost feels like, as you say, it's obvious, or in hindsight, with the gift of hindsight, it's obvious. In many respects, the field is less clear now because we're at the top of the hype cycle. So it seems predictions could even be more dangerous. I think this is a bold step.
I spoke at the AI conference in December, and many of the speakers were predicting a backlash, that there was going to be, the hype was so huge that there'd be essentially it's like a market bubble would pop, and people would become disenchanted with the application of this technology in some areas, and that's feasible, but I think that the applications, there's enough there that as long as people use common sense about where to apply this kind of technology, the hype will go down, of course, into what Gartner calls the trough of disillusionment. We won't have a market collapse. I mean, it's pretty obvious that you don't need to use machine learning for a very structured data application like tracking bank balances, or a lot of the IoT applications don't need machine learning, and you don't want that fuzziness in, let's say, an industrial control application. So there are people making claims about that, but I think that's the exception rather than the rule. So my prediction will be that machine learning becomes ubiquitous in search according to, specific criteria.
All right. Well, you just teased Internet of Things. Let's talk about IoT.
I'm actually not predicting anything for IoT this year, in part because I'm trying to focus on the areas of search, discovery, tracking, Microsoft-oriented technologies, and not the big megatrends. I think that there's plenty of people doing big megatrends. Now, I did similarly have a prediction 2 years ago with IoT going mainstream, and I'll note that was clear within the year, but it's continued to accelerate. There's now something like $2 million per minute in the US in IoT spend, which is double last year. And the kind of applications that are happening are really broad. I have a good friend that has a networked health application that connects your phone, your Fitbit, your home Echo, and to sort of do a universal life, so that when you're coming back from your run, not only will it direct you, it'll order coffee at Starbucks for near the end of your run and heat up your house. It's a little silly. But both Microsoft and Google, as you know, we're partners with both of them now, have very sophisticated development environments where you develop your machine learning models in the cloud and then can deploy them to the edge in small devices. And that's very exciting. So there's plenty to say about that area. I'm just not making any predictions, both because other people are covering megatrends and because I've only got 10.
Do you want to talk a little bit about Teams and Facebook and Jive? It's been a long time since we've talked about. We've done an episode specific to this particular topic, and I know it was on your list last year.
Yes, and this was something that I predicted last year that it also came true. In fact, a little bit more quickly from the standpoint of industry dynamics. So my number 3 prediction was that Teams versus Facebook for Business would become a hot battle that would wound Jive. And Jive was acquired by a PE, a private equity firm, in the middle of the year in June, with a lot of positive spin about where it landed, but it truly was wounded, and the valuation was much lower than many people expected for what had been, the category leader, and the acquisition was sooner than a lot of people expected. So I claim, in terms of last year's predictions, I marked that as having clearly come to pass. Now, Teams in the coming year, similarly, I'm not going to make a specific prediction. It's a huge push from Microsoft, both in terms of opening up bots, providing new Teams APIs. Skype for Business is getting renamed again to be part of Teams. And Teams, from a Microsoft marketing and rhetoric standpoint, will clearly take over. And if you look, I was part of a silly sort of tweet fest about predictions that included a lot around Teams. I'm not going to predict anything this year for the same reason. There's plenty of action there. I will say that we have yet to have someone order a Teams connector for search.
That seems telling.
I sometimes joke that my view is a view from the crawl space, looking out from the basement at what people want to crawl. And I can't generalize the appetite for connectors to the appetite for the service as a whole, but there's definitely a correlation that we stopped seeing. For example, people stopped ordering Cisco Quad connectors, and then a year later, Cisco pulled Quad. It just didn't get the market traction. The demand for our Yammer connector has gone up and down, roughly correlated with people's perception about how alive Yammer is.
What data sovereignty? You had this as number 5 on your list last year. How do you fare?
This is one of the things that in retrospect seems completely obvious. I had noticed both in terms of applications of BA Insight's technology to compliance and governance, which was not our original design point, but suddenly we see people looking at, for example, the auto classifier is being used to scan all kinds of content to look for private information, or right at the end of 2016, I was on this sort of Ask the Experts thing that was dominated by people concerned about data sovereignty, which at the time was a big hole in Microsoft's Office 365 offering. So I said that it would factor in over half of the enterprise IT projects. And the best I could tell from analyst research at the time was that it was at about 20%. This is largely through IDC contacts as opposed to stuff that's published. I was now told it was at 70%. So that happened much faster than I expected. And part of it is this GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations in the EU, is coming up this coming April. And enterprises are getting scared. People are unprepared. It's starting to rear its head in a tsunami-like way. So again, I'm not making a prediction about it this year. It definitely happened last year. I think it's pretty obvious that this will be a dominant force, and that this year will have some of the weird hype that, if you remember, Y2K had, where there's gloom and doom and Nostradamus-like predictions, but that
right.
It will ultimately work its way out. There's too many people are unprepared for the scope of penalties in GDPR, so that something will have to give on the regulatory front. But at the same time, this is going to be a big consideration in almost any new IT project. And as the globe gets even more politically, I'll say, fragmented, you'll see even more regulations like this.
I turn on my tablet device, and I am able today, something that I could not do last year, to bring a Tyrannosaurus Rex into my living room. AR has taken off for those of us who are on the leading/bleeding edge of nerddom, but now I can also shop with IKEA in my living room and put their furniture in my living room. This seems to be another successful point from your list last year.
Yes, and I'm now intrigued by you having a T-Rex in your living room.
It is one of the most satisfying experiences that I have.
Are you trying to get your friends gobbled up by dinosaurs?
I like to take unsuspecting selfies of them getting gobbled up by dinosaurs. Yes, it's true. That is exactly what I do, Jeff.
Next time you invite me over, I'm not coming.
And I have very high ceilings, and so I can muster quite a menagerie of prehistoric beasts.
Okay, yet more unexpected insights on Pete Wright.
How's it applying in your world?
As a mega trend, this is again fairly obvious, and I would say that it's a huge battle in the mega players. I have a talk about the arms race, cognitive arms race, and AR. Conversational interfaces and conversational computing is now part of the rhetoric from Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple. So it's
right,
very much at the top of the hype cycle. I had predicted that these, sort of hands-free holographic things would intersect with search. And actually, I predicted it. This was a carryover from the previous year. I'd predicted it 2 years ago. It didn't happen. And, specifically, the prediction was about information exploration, as opposed to the IKEA app, which I love, by the way. I've used myself to, and Lowe's now has one as well that lets you visualize your kitchen and what do the new cabinets look like, as well as there's a great article from The Atlantic just a couple of weeks ago on AR in manufacturing with production applications at lots of big names like Boeing, Airbus, Samsung, GE, ThyssenKrupp, all of them. What's different now and what made this sort of prediction come true is that all of those and many of the education applications are using search. They're letting you explore information in a much more free-form way than the first sort of generation of AR. That I think that Pokemon Go was clearly an AR application, but even I could not claim it was a search-based application. In this coming year, my specific prediction here is that voice-activated search will come inside the firewall. It's one thing to be able to be in an environment, a consumer or manufacturing thing where you're exploring in a sophisticated way. When you start using total hands-free and voice-activated things, you really need to get good dialogue. And you can taste that, certainly outside the firewall in the consumer world. I think the statistics are about 60% of searches are now mobile, and 20% of them come from a voice command. And part of that is the ubiquity of things like Siri. Inside the firewall, right, it's roughly zero.
Yeah, you have no benefit for the device to call the cloud.
Yes, I would say that though the convenience of being hands-free, I'm starting to see that in customer requests for specific things like laboratory environments where you can't touch a computer and you need to be able to look up something or visualize your lab information while you're working with chemicals or genetics or that kind of thing. Same thing in semiconductor clean rooms. So those are real specialty applications, some of which I'm actually working on with customers. So maybe that makes it I have a T-shirt that says the best way to predict the future is to invent it.
Right.
So perhaps this prediction is in that category. But I think that voice-activated search isn't really reached the enterprise yet, and I think it definitely will within this year. That's my prediction.
I can only imagine. I mean, we added more Echoes to our house, and it has just gotten really stunningly smart. And it's no longer in the realm of I'm surprised when it works. It's in the realm of I'm really surprised when it doesn't. And that's a shift. That is a change.
Yes, definitely. Now, my wife still hates the Echo. I've been given now 6-7 Echoes in the last year as compensation for like a speaker prize or I do a favor for somebody and they go, here, have an Echo or a Dot. It's like becoming a currency, sort of like Bitcoin. It's the swag bag.
It's the
most popular swag of 2017 was an Echo or a Dot.
Let's talk about the intelligent intranet.
This is funny because I predicted that it would become mainstream, and there I was struggling with how to really measure it because it's a perception. This phrase is sort of a marketing hype kind of thing, and you'll notice that we were not immune to using that hype at BA Insight. We have a number of things that are talk about intelligent intranet and how that's dynamic. So does Microsoft. There's a number of other companies now using that in explaining what's new about the digital workplace. But I made a little set of videos in 2016. I bought a new video camera to videotape my son's auditions. He's a serious trumpeter. And I started taking it to conferences where I was speaking and asking people, what is the intelligent intranet? So I'll put a link to these videos that are on our website. It was very funny because you ask 10 people in 2016 and you'd get 12 different answers from 10 people. So my metric was that if I could ask 10 people what the intelligent intranet meant and have 7 of them say the same thing, then this phrase would have become mainstream. And I actually did that. And this was, I'll say, at holiday parties over this past holiday season. So you know how boring of a conversationalist I am when you invite me to your Christmas party.
And your first thing is, wait, let me get my camera.
Tell me what the intelligent intranet is. I asked 20 people, 2 samples of 10, and both of them had 7 or 8 people saying essentially the same thing. So there's something about what this means and where the intelligence comes from and why do you care that's now reached mainstream. And enough that I don't feel the need to predict anything about that in the coming year.
Okay. On our last podcast before the end of the year, we had what I think was a gag. I'm not sure. I think you need to check me on this, that you were going to try to do some sort of mashup to see if you could get your Christmas tree to actually tell you how it was feeling. I think that's the root of your next discussion point, API mashups, highlighting search. Were you able to talk to the tree, and how? What other points do you have to share with us?
You have a great memory. So I had this debate with one of my kids is about to graduate as a neuroscientist about whether trees have feelings and whether you can have feelings or pain without nerves, et cetera, et cetera. And I did in fact hook up basically a potentiometer to a speaker connected to my tree that made interesting noises. Whether that is meaningful or not, it remains a source of debate within my family. But it was really easy to make a mashup that connected that to music library. I figured some people play Mozart to their plants. I thought I could maybe connect plants' feelings to genres of music. I had predicted that API mashups, which have been a phenomena for a decade now, that's since 2008-ish, the idea that you can write lightweight code and connect together lots of different services to do really cool things. I've been expecting that to very visibly use search, and this was one of these carryover predictions that I had made for 2 years in a running. I made it crisp in measurement in the last year, and it actually happened. What I'd said was that the winners of some of the API mashup contests would be highlighting search, and the Amazon Alexa API mashup contest, which happened in November, had the virtual librarian won the most useful API mashup. And it's actually a really cool app. Since you are using the Alexa a lot, Pete, I think you should try it.
Absolutely.
And there was just 3 weeks ago, Google had their first mashup contest, the Actions on Google Developer Challenge. And there was a search-based thing called the credit card helper. What kind of credit card is right for me, which used both structured and unstructured data to tell you, well, here's what you should do. And it got second overall and top in 3 subcategories. So there I claim success, and I'm going to not predict anything related to that this year, but I'm going to really enjoy the kind of applications that get built with search. And our Smart Hub product, which, as you recall, BA Insight released in the fall, is specifically built to allow search mashups. And that's essentially how we do things like leverage the Google or Microsoft image recognition to do image search. So the same kind of technique, I can smell all kinds of exciting applications. So the fact that these API mashups are finally discovering search as a cool service is gratifying.
That is very cool. You have a couple of surprises that hit you in 2017. What surprised you?
Top surprise for me was that you have a T-Rex in your living room.
You did not know that in 2017, Chad. I will count you as right brilliant if you remember that in our podcast for 2019.
Okay. In 2016, there were a number of sort of market changes and acquisitions and things that did, in fact, surprise me. There was a lot less this year, perhaps because I'm wiser or more jaded. But one of the most interesting things to me, which is a sleeper, is that there is a package called Vespa that was open sourced by Yahoo around the end of September. As you know, we work now a lot with Elasticsearch, as well as with Office 365 and SharePoint Search. Elasticsearch has become hands down the most popular search engine. It gained 16 points over the year on DB Engine. Solr lost a lot of traction, and popularity doesn't necessarily correlate to power, but it really does with Elasticsearch. Vespa has been what Yahoo uses for their various properties and is done by the same group that open sourced Hadoop. Hadoop, if you're not familiar with it, is sort of the synonymous with data lakes and big data. Was written originally by Doug Cutting while he was at Yahoo. Doug is the same guy that wrote Lucene initially. And he also contributed to this Vespa project, which is very large scale, very easy to work with from a API and integration standpoint, and specifically designed for sophisticated matching and recommendations in search. So I was surprised that Yahoo open sourced it. It's been a crown jewels. I'll be intrigued to see what the adoption is like. I noticed that even though it's been open source since, essentially the very end of September, now about 3 months, all the committers are still at Yahoo, and there's a lot of pull requests, but not a lot of them being taken up. That has the potential to really make a difference in the high end of search. It's a new, powerful open source package. I was also actually surprised by Elasticsearch acquiring a company called SwiftType. This happened in December. We're a partner with Elasticsearch. They actually gave us a heads up ahead of time. I knew the SwiftType guys, and they have a really nice package for website search. If you have a website and you want to provide good search in it, the go-to a couple years ago was Google Site Search. Google pulled that. They also started adding advertising into Google Custom Search, and nobody really wants other people's ads to show up on their own website. So this was a ripe space, but Elastic acquiring SwiftType, really a smart move, and I didn't see it coming. So those are my two real surprises.
Well, then let's walk through briefly. You've already alluded to some of these. Your predictions for 2018. Let's do a little bit of a rapid fire here and talk about your top 10.
Pledge around the same time this podcast comes up. I'll have a written form of this as a blog, as I did last year, so that readers who are interested can look at all the details, and readers who have are particularly perverse can hold me to it and give me a hard time. And I think my top one is that hyper-personalization will take hold. Again, specific to search, but it's been well established over the years that tailoring search to who you are and your role is a very effective way to make search better in a way that providing facets was new 15 years ago is now de rigueur. Personalization really started 5 years ago. It wasn't until a couple years ago that people were comfortable with you and I having different search results. That's now established, and I predict that will go very quickly into something that is super tailored to you, what your behavior has been, what you've been looking at just now, and very personalized. So I'll call it hyper-personalization. We already talked about machine learning being ubiquitous in search. That's number 2. Number 3 is that open architecture for search will gain traction. And this is a very specific viewpoint in some sense, because as you know, BA Insight's been our claim to fame, if there's a real distinction, is that we have a powerful search that's completely open architecture. We don't prescribe the search engine. We've opened that further beyond multiple search engines to open it to multiple cognitive services. And that's working very well for our customers, very well for us as a company. I am predicting that other vendors will follow and give us a run for our money. I'm not afraid of that competition. I think that'll be fun. And that this approach will become recognized as a good technique for people that want to have control and some degree of safety against future change. So that's number 3. Number 4 is that Microsoft will splinter their search offerings. I got a lot of questions about this subsequent to the last Ignite. Microsoft, as you will hear on some of the previous podcasts, including guest speakers, came out with some really interesting new search facilities, but confused a lot of people with the lack of coherence. There's now 9 different search experiences within Office 365 alone, not counting Exchange, Dynamics, Teams, not counting the specific siloed services that each have their own search. There's also modern search, classic search in SharePoint, and Azure search. So there's a lot of curiosity in the market for how this will play out. I see it, and I will predict that it will splinter, that there'll no longer really be even a pretense of having Azure search be coherent with Office 365 search. It will be an alternative. And this will also probably be one of those areas where BA Insight will be working actively with customers and with Microsoft to make that come true. Not that I desire to splinter Microsoft's offerings, but I'm very bullish on Azure search in particular.
Number 5, we've already talked about a little bit.
Yeah, which is that voice-activated search will come inside the firewall. 6, 7, and 8, I'm taking the 3 things which I predicted but didn't come true and saw some trending over the last year, and I'm carrying them forward. And it's arguable whether that's skewing my success rate by just giving things more time, but I had a blog last year where I discussed how that works. It both increases and decreases things. So that's 6, 7, and 8. For number 9, I predict that blockchain-based search engines will appear. And that takes a little bit more explaining. Blockchain is one of those mega trends that you can't not read about if you follow the IT press. And blockchain is associated with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is both one of the initial contributors to the blockchain open source technology, and also because Bitcoin has become mainstream and gotten a lot of publicity in the last year. But blockchain is technologically a way to do distributed secure transactions. And there's a ton of applications. They haven't yet hit home to search. There's 2 really interesting projects, one that's academic and one that is a startup aimed at consumer search, that are using blockchain as a basis for secure search that's distributed. My prediction is that these will actually come out and be effective. The startup, which was sort of founded mid-year, has a lot of rhetoric that they're going to take out Google, et cetera. But I think that there's been a gap in encrypted search. When you encrypt a search index, it's very hard to do good matching. So security concerns in people that really want highly encrypted environments have a stumbling block here. And that is a gap that I think that blockchain could fill. Number 10 is that big data will give way to smart data. And here I would welcome anyone's suggestions about how to make this crisper and maybe less cute, but big data has become so overhyped as to be meaningless. To the extent that it has a connotation, it is associated with large quantities of data. But in fact, most problems and most enterprise problems don't have billions of data points that they're computing on the way that you might have if you're doing consumer predictions, or if you're trying to subvert public elections or things like that with big data. They have real problems that can benefit from the intelligence and computing power of big data in the cloud without having billions of data points. You might have 10 million customers you want to know about. That's not big data. That's actually pretty small data. There's so much more you can do and much more you can know about using these kind of techniques, whether machine learning or cross-correlation. Linked data is a big piece of this. If you're not familiar with it, there's a rise in publicly available data sets where if you can resolve your internal entities and connect them to the outside world, you've got a much bigger picture. So I predict that will really take hold in 2018, and you'll be hearing a lot more of it, whether it's called smart data or not.
There are the top 10 predictions. Again, those will be on the blog over at BA Insight and linked in the show notes here. I feel like I have a number of potential bonus predictions that I would like you to just be thinking about before we podcast this time next year. First, you said that people play Mozart to plants. I expected you fully to answer what song or artist plants would play for humans. That goes unanswered. And your swag bag gift of 2017 was the Echo. Jeff, what is the hot swag bag gift of 2018? What will you be awash with over the next year?
Oh, that's a very good question. I expect that I will be overtaken by robotic devices such as lawnmowers and cat hair removers in this coming year, and that will be the swag bag element. As for the music predictors, let's make a prediction that what is that app? Shazam?
Yes. Yeah.
Someone will come out with Shazam for plants this year. I was looking through as part of this Albert Einstein's predictions in 1915, because he started doing an annual. Not that I'm Albert Einstein, but doing like these fun predictions, and they were actually at that time all about World War I kind of things, and I'll say that he had a great sense of humor, so he would also have predicted Shazam for plants for 2018.
Well, plants already have their own preferred music service. Have you heard of this?
No, I like it.
Sporify. I'll include a laugh track on that joke. Thank you very much, Jeff Fried, CTO BA Insight. It's great to talk to you this fine 2018. Looking forward to a great year.
Absolutely. Happy New Year. And I'd love to hear from listeners what you think of these predictions and where you will trip me up.
Awesome. We'll look forward to that. Thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to this show. As usual, you can find us wherever finer podcasts are served, including Spotify, maybe Sporify. I don't know. We'll see what it takes to get in there for plants. Thanks, everybody. On behalf of Jeff Fried, I'm Pete Wright. We'll catch you next time right here on Shared Insights, the podcast from BA Insight.